Hello, welcome to today's segment of Our Ventura TV. My name is George Alger. Today we're going to be talking about special needs children, and our guest expert is Stephen Weed, who is the parent of a special needs child. Welcome, Stephen.
Hey, George. Thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, good to have you. Now let's just touch bases on what is special needs right off the bat.
Boy, special needs can be a lot of different things. Special needs can be anything from a real severe condition, such as cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, to something that appears to be relatively minor, like dysgraphia or something like that.
Good. Now, how old is your child?
Well, we have two. Our oldest is 16.
Good. And what have you learned about being a parent of a special needs child?
Wow. So there's a lot to learn. People that don't have special needs can never imagine everything that's involved in that. The one thing, well, actually, there's two things I'd like to mention. First of all, there are experts who will tell you this is the way you should approach your particular situation, and sometimes that works. Fortunately, it works for a lot of people, but there are some times that the experts, such as school special ed teachers or pediatricians or even specialists, don't really have the skills to understand what's happening with your child. So what I would say is simply don't take the first response if you suspect that's not going to meet your child's needs.
Wow, okay, so any guidance here? Because even if they talk to 12 people, how are they going to know what's going to be better?
Well, that's really the heartbreak for so many parents who have children that don't seem to fit into the normal curriculum in schools. Schools will offer what they think is needed to address a particular learning disability, but they're not doctors, and they can't suggest that your son or daughter has a particular condition. So the most important thing, again, that I can stress is that you need to be aware of how your children are behaving, not only out of school, but also in school. Typically, people discover that maybe something's amiss with a child's development, not through the pediatrician, not through their mother or someone in the neighborhood, but when they take that child and put them in an environment where their mental capabilities are really tested by schoolwork. And like I said, some conditions are very easy to diagnose because they're medically diagnosed. If your son or daughter goes to school and they're struggling with reading, the teacher might say, well, go and see an optometrist. The optometrist says you're fine. What's the school going to do? Because they're not medically trained. That's not their responsibility. So you have to be able to really go beyond any sort of diagnosis if you don't think it's really fitting your child.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess this is kind of obvious, but there is no one size fits all.
Well, there isn't. And you need to be aware of that. And that's one of the reasons why I started about a year and a half ago to see if I could change the structure of how special education works in California. There's a lot of different reasons why you don't get a medical diagnosis from someone at school. There's a lot of reasons why those people don't even know all the possibilities that could fit your child, because they don't truly diagnose medically. They observe and they say, well, I think it's this. Let's try this. My idea is that parents need to know alternative diagnoses for their children. And if they don't get it from their pediatrician, which is not that uncommon, they need to at least be able to explore having information about what it might be if it's not this. So as an example, I talked a little bit about writing. Sometimes kids have problems with writing. Traditionally, in most public school settings, if a school decides, well, maybe your child's really having problems with writing, it must be dysgraphia. Right? They can't form the letters right. That's one possibility, but there could be vision issues, there could be neurological issues, there could be a lot of other issues. So oftentimes the dysgraphia therapies will help, but they may not really address the medical issues. So If parents go to school and they say, something's not quite right with your son, we've tried the therapies for fine motor skill to get them to be able to trace the numbers correctly, and it's kind of working. But you might take a look at this option that's been medically vetted by the state of California. It might fit, it might not, but it's another opportunity for you to get your child the medical attention that they need.
Good. So let's talk a bit more about this legislation. And particularly, can you kind of compare and contrast what you're proposing versus the existing SEED?
That's a great question, George. There are many reasons why kids don't get the right therapies. And a lot of what happens is that a school district kind of has an approach to special education. Some districts provide a lot of services because they have robust budgets and they have people that are trained and they're willing to meet those needs. Federal legislation says that's the way it should work, but for a lot of different reasons it doesn't. What a lot of times happens is that if a district says, if they were to say, well, we're not exactly sure, but why don't you go take a look at this therapy that could help your child? They're afraid that if a parent goes and gets an official diagnosis for that, then that particular district is going to be stuck footing the bill for those therapies. So that's the catch-22. Even if districts really want to help, sometimes they're a little afraid to do that. So what my bill does is it says the state, the Office of Education and other practitioners in certain areas of medical fields can develop guidelines for what these other therapies do, for what conditions they may treat, and may be effective in helping medically. And that information can be made available to school districts. But with the caveat that if they give the information out, the school district is not on the hook for those therapies unless it's otherwise indicated. So in other words, they kind of get a pass on disseminating the information so that they don't have to worry about giving the information out. So the net effect is that parents can take that information and research it and try therapies, and if it works, then their child is ever so much better for it. Also, the schools will have kids, that certain segment of children, who get therapies outside who will do better in school. And the California state budget for special education has been increasing astronomically. There are over 600,000 kids that receive special ed services. If you could reduce that amount just by 1 or 2%, the state would save millions of dollars. So the real rub has always been, well, we don't want to be on the hook for any therapy bills. This legislation attempts to take that burden off of schools and make information available to parents that can help their kids outside of the school systems.
Okay, is there any type of legislation like this elsewhere in the country that you're aware of?
I've reached out to other people I know who work in education, and there have been some attempts to bring in certain particular medical issues. Even in the state of California, they've tried to do a lot with hearing. They've tried to, for many, many years, the school nurses do annual vision checks for the students. And so there's been attempts, but they don't do it at the level that's needed to diagnose some conditions. And, quite honestly, the school gets a lot of responsibilities for a variety of different issues for children put on their plate when maybe they really shouldn't. So, but that type of legislation is out there, like in California for vision testing and basic hearing testing. But I don't know of anything that's been proposed like this nationwide.
Okay. Is there a name for this proposal?
I've struggled with acronyms and stuff, and like it's not even real legislation now. But basically, my thought was to call it special needs awareness information, something like that, to serve as a working title for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I was to try to underscore some of the points here, we'd say that we're trying to be more helpful to special needs children. We're trying to be sensitive to the budgeting of the state, and also sort of unblock some limitations that the various school districts have established based on the flows of the money that's going around it. Okay, so do I have that correct?
Generally.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to use fewer words.
It's a complex subject.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Now, you've been underscoring or certainly highlighting the medical things here, of course. But is it possible that there might be some types of therapies that will be good for certain special need kids that could be, I don't know, not medical, not using drugs, maybe just working, I'm just making stuff up, working outdoors more, or engaging with more, I don't know, more special tasks?
Well, so I don't really know where you're going with that, but there are some things that can help in a lot of different ways. You talked about working outdoors. So some children have tactile issues where their sense of touch is not calibrated correctly, and schools do some of that therapy under the auspices of large motor occupational therapy. Sometimes someone's ability to touch at an appropriate level can be retrained that way, but sometimes there's deeper neurological issues. And until you try something like occupational therapy, you don't know if that's going to be sufficient. So it's a good first step, but my wife and I have met dozens, if not hundreds, of parents just like us through the schools, through events put on by a variety of different agencies and groups that try and support parents online. And the predominant thing is what you said earlier. One size doesn't fit all. And the problem is that even if you know your child has special needs, you can never imagine the amount of effort you have to put in trying to find out what's going to help that child. What I'm trying to do is have the information more readily available to parents if what's not provided to them doesn't work.
Got it.
Some of it's nutritional, some of it's neurological. There's just a lot of different things involved.
And that highlights the direction I was going at. There may be other things like that could actually help the child, and the fact that you're open to that, and legislation is open to that, is great. We're out of time here, though, but I wonder if you could sneak in the website where people can go to for more information.
Sure, absolutely. The website is mostly for parents who have had an experience like my family has. It's very simple. It's www.caspecialed.net. And it talks about my proposal. The full text of it is there. There's contact information to reach out to your legislative representatives, ways that you can get involved.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
My pleasure. Great to meet you, George.
This is George Alger signing off for this segment of Our Ventura TV. Until I meet again.